Don't embarrass me at my own gala, Nora. Sit at the back table with the caterers. That's where help belongs. My mother snapped the seating card out of my hand before I'd even finished reading my own name on it. She'd written it herself, in that calligraphy pen she only used for important events. Table 14. Back, near kitchen doors. I stood there in the one good dress I owned, in the ballroom of the Cleveland Park Hotel in Washington, D.C., while 200 guests in tuxedos and gowns drifted past us toward the bar. She crumpled the card and pressed a new one into my palm before I could argue. Then she turned, plastered on the smile she saved for donors, and called out to my sister across the room. "Brooke! Darling! Come meet the Hendersons!" Brooke came gliding over in a champagne-colored gown that cost more than my monthly paycheck, the diamond studs his mother had given her for her 30th birthday catching the chandelier light. She air-kissed two strangers I'd never met and laughed at something one of them said, tossing her hair back the exact way our mother taught her when she was 12. I was 38 years old, and I was still being handed the children's table. For 11 years, I had been quietly wiring money into an account that paid my mother's mortgage on the Georgetown townhouse she loved to host these galas in. I had paid off Brooke's law school loans, all $190,000 of them, through a shell account she thought was a forgivable grant from some foundation her sorority sister mentioned once. I had covered the deposit on Brooke's wedding venue 2 years ago, money she told everyone came from Daddy's old life insurance, though our father had been broke when he died. Today, the daughter who kept saying yes finally said nothing at all. I didn't sit at table 14. I walked straight past the gift table, past the silent auction tables stacked with donated vacations and spa packages, and out through the side hallway where the hotel staff kept their service corridor. I found the building's security office, badged in with credentials that weren't issued by any hotel, and asked the man at the desk to patch me through to my office. The security guard's eyebrows went up when he saw what I handed him. He picked up the phone immediately. If you've ever been the one who paid for everything and got seated with the help, hit like right now. Because to understand why I finally stopped smiling and started speaking, you have to go back to the night before, to a dinner table in Georgetown where I learned, again, exactly what I was worth to my own family. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of gray DC evening where the Potomac looks like wet concrete. I'd just come off a 16-hour day, testimony prep that ran long, a closed briefing that ran longer, and I drove straight to my mother's house in my gray Honda Civic with 80,000 miles on it, because she'd texted that it was important family business, and I knew better than to ignore that particular phrase. I parked on the street because Brooke's BMW was already in the driveway, taking up both spaces like it always did. My mother opened the door before I even knocked, took one look at my blazer, the same navy blazer I'd worn to work, slightly wrinkled from the day, and sighed like I'd shown up in pajamas. "You couldn't have changed. Brooke's bringing the partners from her firm tonight." I hadn't known there would be partners. I hadn't known there would be anyone but us. I said nothing and followed her into the dining room, where the good china was out. The china that came out for guests, never for me. There were 12 people at that table. Brooke's husband, 2 senior partners from her law firm and their wives, a city council member my mother was courting for some committee, and a cousin visiting from Ohio. I was seated at the far corner, past the flower arrangement, where I had to lean to see anyone. No wine poured for me. A water glass, half filled with a chip in the rim that no one else's glass had. My mother carved the roast herself, the way she always did when she wanted an audience, and set the best cut, the center, the part everyone wants, onto Brooke's plate. "For my brilliant daughter," she announced, raising her voice just enough that the partners would hear, "the youngest woman ever made partner track at Doyle Sutton this year." Partner track. Brooke had been partner track for 3 years. I happened to know, because I'd seen the firm's internal billing records once by accident on a shared drive, that her hours hadn't cleared the threshold even once. But nobody at that table knew that, and I certainly wasn't going to be the one to say it. When my mother got to my plate, she scraped the leftover scraps off the serving tray, the dry end pieces, the parts that had been sitting under the heat lamp too long, onto my plate without looking at me. "You're at a desk all day," she said to the table, not to me. "You don't need the good stuff. Has to go somewhere." One of the law partners, a tall man with silver hair, leaned toward me politely. "And what do you do, Nora?" Before I could answer, my mother cut in, the way she always did. "Oh, Nora works for the government. Paperwork, mostly. We don't really get into it." She said it with a small laugh, like it was a fond little secret, and the partner nodded and turned his attention back to Brooke, who was telling a story about a deposition that made the whole table laugh. After dinner, Brooke's husband handed my mother a small velvet box. Inside was a tennis bracelet, an anniversary gift from Brooke for everything you've done for us. My mother cried real tears, clutching Brooke's hands across the table like she'd just been handed a Nobel Prize. Then my mother reached into the drawer of the hutch behind her and pulled out an envelope, sliding it down the table until it bumped my water glass. Inside were expired grocery coupons, 50 cents off canned soup, most of them a month past date, that she'd apparently been saving for me. "I know things are tight for you," she said, loud enough for the cousin from Ohio to hear. "These might help. Just don't make a scene at the register if they don't take them." My niece, Brooke's 7-year-old, who'd been allowed to stay up past her bedtime, tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, loud enough for half the table, "Is Aunt Nora poor?" Nobody corrected her. My mother actually laughed. 12 people sat at that table, and not one of them said a word. Under the tablecloth, my hands were flat on my knees, nails pressed into my palms. I had an encrypted phone in my bag, the same kind they issue at my office for travel, and I knew exactly what was sitting in my personal banking app. A scheduled transfer of $6,200, due on the first of the month, that would land in my mother's mortgage escrow account like it had every month for 11 years. Money she had no idea came from me. Money she thought, when she thought about it at all, came from some trust Dad set up, because that was easier to believe than the truth. My thumb found the app under the table. I didn't cancel it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. Then my mother clinked her glass for one more announcement. The family was going to Aspen for Christmas, a chalet she'd already booked for the kids, meaning Brooke's family plus herself. For me, she'd found a perfectly nice motel 11 miles outside town, the kind near the highway with a vending machine in the lobby. "And Nora," she added, pointing her fork at me, "you'll handle the luggage at the airport, all of it. Brooke's back has been bothering her since the wedding." Brooke nodded gravely, as though carrying her own garment bag might shatter her spine. I excused myself before dessert. I drove home with the radio off, the whole way down Wisconsin Avenue, past the embassies and the dog walkers and the people living lives that had nothing to do with mine. I want to tell you the part of my life my mother had never once asked about. I work for the State Department, in a division most people have never heard of, and that I'm not allowed to describe in detail at family dinners, or really anywhere outside a badge access building. The blazer she sighed at, the slightly wrinkled one, I'd been wearing for 16 hours because I'd spent that day in a secure facility, coordinating with 3 allied governments on a situation in Eastern Europe that, if it had gone differently, would have been on every news channel in America within 48 hours. I don't get to talk about days like that. I go home, I eat cold takeout standing at my kitchen counter, and I go back the next morning. I joined the Foreign Service at 23 with a degree my mother called a waste of a perfectly good law school acceptance. I'd gotten into 3 and turned them all down. She never forgave me for that, not really. While Brooke was racking up debt at a top 14 school, I was learning Mandarin in a cramped apartment in Taipei on a government stipend, then doing 2 years in a hardship post in Central Asia that I still don't talk about much. I came back from that posting with a service commendation and a habit of checking exits in every room I walk into. Nobody at that dinner table asked about either one. What they did know, what I'd let them believe, was that I worked for the government in some vague clerical capacity, because 11 years ago, fresh off that posting, I'd quietly set up an automatic transfer to cover my mother's mortgage when her second husband left her with debt and a house she couldn't afford alone. I'd done it through an account routed so she'd never trace it back to me, partly because the work I do requires a level of financial discretion most people never think about, and partly, if I'm honest, because some small, stupid, hopeful part of me thought that if she never knew, she'd never feel like she owed me anything. And maybe, she'd just love me anyway, without a transaction attached. She never did. She just got used to having money she didn't ask questions about. I'd done the same for Brooke's loans 2 years later, then for the wedding deposit, then for a business opportunity. Brooke's husband chased that fell apart within 8 months, and that I quietly absorbed so neither of them ever had to explain it to anyone. Over 11 years, the number came to just over $740,000. Mortgage payments, tuition, a wedding venue, a bracelet, technically, since that money had to come from somewhere too, and Brooke's husband didn't make what he claimed to make. Every cent of it, dodging around the edges of a life I couldn't fully tell either of them about, sent quietly into a family that called it Dad's money and then handed me a chipped water glass. The morning after that dinner, I was back in my building before 7, in a secure conference room 3 floors below street level, when my supervisor, a woman named Director Patricia Wren, who has run interagency coordination for longer than I've been alive, slid a folder across the table to me that had been misfiled by a junior analyst. Inside, stapled to a classified travel authorization, was a printout, my mother's Christmas itinerary forwarded to my work email by accident when she meant to send it to my personal account. Motel reservation, 11 miles outside Aspen, my name on it. Director Wren looked at the printout, then at me for a long moment. "What exactly is this, Nora?" I told her. Not all of it. I didn't have the words for all of it that morning, but enough. The mortgage, the tuition. 11 years of transfers nobody knew about, sent to people who thought I filed paperwork for a living, who'd seated me by the kitchen doors of my own family for over a decade, because they genuinely believed that's all I was worth. She didn't say much. She closed the folder, set it down, and asked me one question. And what do you get out of it? I didn't have an answer. That was the problem. 2 days later, my mother held her annual gala, the same one she'd held every October for the past 9 years, raising money for a children's hospital foundation she chaired, the kind of event where she got to be exactly the woman she always wanted people to think she was. 200 guests, a silent auction, a ballroom at the Cleveland Park Hotel that, I happened to know, the hotel had agreed to comp partially because my mother sat on a community board that controlled certain permits. Connections, not character, the way most of her world worked. I almost didn't go. I went because Brooke asked me to help carry boxes of auction items the morning of, the way I always did, and because some part of me still hadn't fully let go of hoping that one of these nights would be different. It wasn't. My mother handed me that seating card, table 14, back, near the kitchen doors, without even looking at me, already calling out to Brooke across the room. I stood there in my one good dress while 200 strangers in formal wear drifted past me toward the bar, and I thought about the printout in Director Wren's folder. I thought about 16-hour days nobody at that table had ever asked about. I thought about a water glass with a chip in the rim that no one else's glass ever had. I walked to the hotel's security office instead of table 14. I showed the man at the desk credentials that aren't issued by any hotel chain, and I asked him to connect me, on a secure line, to my office's duty desk. Standard protocol anytime personnel with my clearance are at a large public gathering with a guest list that hasn't been vetted. It's procedure. I'd never had to use it before. 20 minutes later, 2 men in plain dark suits walked into that ballroom and found me near the silent auction tables. Speaking low and professional, the way people speak when they're not interested in causing a scene but absolutely will if needed. One of them had an earpiece. My mother, mid-conversation with the city council member, noticed the room's energy shift before she noticed me. Calloway, the taller one said, using my actual last name, the one my mother had stopped introducing me by years ago, since Nora, my daughter, was easier than explaining why a woman with a government security detail occasionally needed to step out of family functions. We need 5 minutes. The ballroom had gone quiet in that specific way rooms go quiet when they sense something real is happening and not performance. My mother's face had gone the particular shade of pale that happens when a story you've told yourself for years suddenly doesn't add up anymore. What is this? She said, voice climbing. Nora, what did you do? I didn't answer her directly. I turned to the man with the earpiece instead. It's fine. Standard check-in. I'll be a few minutes. But my mother followed, 3 steps behind, the way she never followed me anywhere unless it served her, all the way to the hallway outside the ballroom, where Brooke had also appeared, champagne-colored gown and confusion on her face in equal measure. Why are men with earpieces talking to you like you're someone? My mother demanded. And there it was, 11 years distilled into one sentence, like you're someone. As though the alternative, that I'd been someone the whole time and she simply hadn't bothered to look, was the part she couldn't process. I work for the State Department, I said. My voice didn't shake. Not paperwork, not a desk job you don't get into. I hold a security clearance most people in that ballroom couldn't get within 10 years of qualifying for. And 11 years ago, when your second husband left you with a mortgage you couldn't carry, I started paying it, every month. Still am, as of this morning, though I canceled the transfer on my drive over here tonight. The color left her face entirely. I paid for Brooke's law school, all of it. I paid the deposit on her wedding. I covered Marcus's failed investment so neither of you ever had to explain it to anyone. $740,000 over 11 years from a daughter you sat behind the kitchen doors tonight because you genuinely believed that's where I belonged. Brooke's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The husband who'd handed our mother a tennis bracelet 2 nights ago, paid for, ultimately, by money he never traced back to me, stood frozen by the ballroom doors, his face doing the math in real time. My mother grabbed for my arm the way she does when she's losing control of a room. You should have told us. We're your family. We had a right to know what you. You had 11 years to ask, I said. You asked Brooke about her hours at the firm. You asked her husband about his portfolio. You never once asked me what I actually do, because you'd already decided what I was worth, and asking might have complicated that. I looked at my mother's hands, the tennis bracelet still on her wrist, the same hands that had handed me an envelope of expired coupons 2 nights before. You're not upset because you were cruel to me for a decade, I said. You're upset because the story stopped working. That's different. I turned and walked back toward the ballroom exit, past the silent auction tables stacked with vacations I'd never been invited on, past table 14 sitting empty and unclaimed near the kitchen doors, and out into the cold October night, where my actual life, the one nobody at that gala had ever asked about, was waiting for me, the way it always had, quietly, without needing a seating card at all. 3 days later, the calls started. 41 texts from my mother in under 6 hours, oscillating between fury and a kind of desperate transactional warmth I recognized instantly because I'd seen it my whole life. Please call me, we can fix this. Then, the board is asking questions about the foundation's reputation after that scene, you need to come smooth things over. Then, finally, the one that told me everything I needed to know about what those 11 years had actually meant to her, name your price. I'll pay you back every cent if you just come to the holiday party and act like nothing happened. I blocked her number. I blocked Brooks, who'd sent a single message, "This is so embarrassing for Mom, are you happy now?" that managed to summarize, in 11 words, exactly why I wasn't sorry. I blocked an aunt who called me selfish, a cousin who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years, but suddenly remembered family loyalty the moment money got involved. Then I opened my banking app one more time and confirmed what I'd started in that hallway. The mortgage transfer, canceled for good. 11 years of quiet support, gone in 4 taps the way it should have ended a long time ago. I went back to work the following Monday. Director Wren never brought up the gala again, except once weeks later in the elevator when she said simply, "Good. You looked like someone who finally stopped apologizing for the room she was in." I think about that water glass sometimes, the chip in the rim that no other glass at that table ever had. I think about how long I mistook being useful for being loved, how I confused paying for a family's comfort with earning a place in it. Nobody ever taught me that those are different things. I had to learn it myself, in a hallway outside a ballroom, with 2 men in dark suits standing a respectful distance behind me, in the one good dress I owned. I don't sit at the back table anymore. I don't sit at tables I have to pay for the privilege of attending, either. These days, when I walk into a room, I walk in like I belong there, because for the first time in my life, I'm the one who decides whether I do.